Welcome to Not Just Money with your hosts, Doretta and Lee. This isn't your typical podcast about finances. It's a podcast about all the money conversations we aren't having, sometimes not even with ourselves. Join us on this journey of hard truths, lived experience, and the wisdom that comes from both. Because money is never just about money.
Hey Lee, did you get your taxes off before the deadline?
I did, and paid my bill. Ouch. I do feel a sense of relief that it all got done, though.
Well, and at least you can take comfort in the fact that you got to use the money interest-free for a year.
Yep, and like I said last week, I actually allowed myself to indulge a little bit because the fact that I owe means I had a better than anticipated year last year. I think everything needs a silver lining.
Yeah. What did you splurge on?
Well, I told you I bought, a cooler backpack for the summer. I got some tickets.
Nice.
I'm treating myself to a concert on my birthday, which I'm going by myself because no one likes that artist in this family. But I'm like, you know what? Heck, it's my birthday. I'm allowed.
Good for you. Good for you. I still think it's funny, though. I mean, I owed something as well, but I can't say it inspired me to spend. And just, to move some money around to cover the shortfall. But let's take a closer look at that today. What to do after you filed your taxes.
And everyone out there did file your taxes, right? Right? It's so important.
Actually, why don't we start there? What happens once you file your taxes?
So assuming that you or your tax preparer, if you have one, are filing online at NETFILE and you have direct deposit set up, the process is pretty efficient. It generally takes less than 2 weeks for a straightforward tax return, and if you're getting a refund, for it to be directly deposited into your account.
And what about if you file the old-fashioned way, like filling in a paper return?
You can still do that? Seriously? Didn't the CRA stop printing physical forms?
No, you can still request them. 95% of returns are filed digitally, but there's still that 5%.
Who are these 5%? Seriously, show me. I don't actually know that, so I'll have to look it up. I have no idea what the timing looks like. Okay. Looking this up. Real time here. 8 to 12 weeks? We can say a lot of stuff about AI, but it's fast and likely add some helpful tidbits. Like, there are things that can hold up your return, though. If your return is selected for review, information doesn't match CRA records, you owe other government debts, your banking details are wrong, which is possible, right? Because you're not actually logging in via your banking credentials, so if you write a wrong number, whatever, or you have missing slips, so T4, T5, etc. You can check the status of your return on My Account, the CRA's website. And remember that the CRA can also keep part or all of your refund if you owe things like taxes, student loans, EI overpayments, or certain government debts.
Okay, so
helpful.
Yeah, it is helpful. So that's if you're getting a refund. What if you owe? How do you pay?
Generally, what you owe is due April 30th, which for most of us is also the filing deadline. Now, if you're self-employed, you have until June 15th to file, but you still have to pay by April 30th. And there are lots of ways to pay. There's online banking, like you would pay any bill, and it's really helpful because it actually updates it every year. So it actually says for your 2025 tax return, you can pay through the CRA website, My Account. They take pre-authorized debit. If you pay by credit card, you have to go through like a third-party service, and there's generally probably fees associated to that, and then a debit card through certain services.
And what about for those 5% who are filing manually?
Seriously, stop. You can do better. Yes, you can apparently send a check. Do people still write checks? Yikes.
I guess the same people who fill out the forms by hand still write checks.
So true.
Okay. I think it's important here to say a few words about what to do if you owe money and you just don't have it right now. So, last week, when we talked about why we pay taxes, we stressed how important it is to file on time. It's super important to file even if you don't owe, because Canada actually determines eligibility for social programming and delivers actual money through the tax system, which means that yes, you can get a refund even if you didn't pay any taxes. And we did mention also that it's super important to file if you do owe, because not filing means penalties and interest.
Those penalties are considerable. If you file on time but pay late, you will face interest charges. But if you also file late, there are additional charges. It's like insult to injury. So the non filing penalty is 5% of what you owe, and it goes up by an additional 1% for every passing month to a maximum of 12 months. And if you still don't pay, or if you still don't file, it just keeps getting worse. Oh, and don't be a repeat offender, because if you are late filing in any of the previous 3 years, the initial penalties double and they go on for 20 months.
Yikes, you definitely don't want to get in that deep.
You do not. So even if you don't have the money to pay, like Doretta was saying, it's important to file to avoid those additional charges because they ain't gonna go away. Any more than the taxes you owe will go away. Don't be an ostrich.
That's a random line. Don't bury your head in the sand?
I don't know. Do people not say that anymore?
I don't know, showing your age, Lee. So,
Whoops.
let's talk about that for a minute. If you owe money and you don't have it, it can be really scary.
Yeah, big feelings, especially if you weren't prepared for it. And there's just something about the CRA that makes people terrified of it. Like it's this big faceless monster. And I get it. Life's tough right now. Cost of living is high. I mean, food prices are through the roof. Gas is crazy high, which is tough, especially if you need your car for work. And then if you've got, refinancing your mortgage on that list, or your rent has gone up, or you've had to face some kind of emergency, I don't know, broken down car, pet sickness, whatever. It's awful.
Yep, life happens. And if you're hit by an unexpected or even an expected tax bill, you're probably super stressed and maybe defensive, ashamed, angry, all the feelings. So, what to do?
Well, don't hide and don't wait until you have the money. The first step, and this might surprise people, is to contact the CRA or the Canada Revenue Agency. Seriously, you can schedule a series of pre authorized debit payments online, or you can phone them and talk to someone. They have people on staff whose job it is to help you set up a payment arrangement, and we'll include the links in the episode notes. Just don't wait. If you do nothing, penalties and interest grow. Your benefit payments, like your GST, HST credit, Canada Child Benefit if you have children, they can stop. The CRA may estimate your income for you, and they are rarely generous. They can start collection procedures. So that's like wage garnishments, frozen funds, liens in serious cases. Honestly, the stress just ramps up from there.
And I actually have a story about that. I was a stay at home mom for 7 years. And one day I got a call from a former colleague who I hadn't talked to in like just ages with out of the blue a potential contract. And if I'm honest, I have to say it came at a perfect time because money was getting pretty tight and I'd been thinking about going back to work. And it turned out to be the perfect solution. And before I knew it, I had launched a successful consulting career. But that first year, I screwed up my taxes and I got hit with a big tax bill. I still remember the feeling in the pit of my stomach when I opened that envelope from CRA. It was awful. I mean, awful. I had the money in my emergency fund, but it was such a shock.
Yeah, no one wants to get a letter from the CRA in the mail. It means in most cases, something's going to happen. Many times a question that, you may not want to answer. So what did you do?
Well, to be honest, for a couple of days, I just totally stressed out.
Of course you did. This is also known as the Doretta death spiral.
Ah,
You had the money and you still overreacted.
just don't, okay? This was really traumatic for me. And it wasn't as simple as just paying the outstanding amount. It included interest payments,
So this was after the deadline?
was after the payment deadline, not the filing deadline. Self-employed, remember? But I had screwed up the
Mm.
installments and the timing and my GST. And to be honest, I don't actually remember the details. What I remember is how I felt.
Interesting. Isn't it? That the details kind of melt away, but we feel those emotions and remember them. I feel like there's a lesson here.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's why stress is the number one killer. Like, if I start to think about this too deeply, I can actually feel those feelings come back. Like I just don't want to think
Oh.
about it anymore. Anyway, after a couple of sleepless nights, I got up my nerve. I called CRA, and I admit I was scared. And I started the conversation something like this: "I am so sorry. This is totally my fault, but please help me fix it."
Typical Doretta.
Well, I don't know. I don't think they get a lot of calls like that. I think often people are just really defensive and angry and scared and stuff. I was just like begging for pity. But I have to say that the gentleman I dealt with was so helpful and so patient. I actually got his name and I wrote a letter to his supervisor. And from that point on, whenever I had a tax question, I had a friend at CRA until he retired. I also got an accountant after that.
Lols. And this is a great point. Sometimes begging for sympathy does take you places. And the point that this makes is don't be afraid to talk to the CRA. I know, and Doretta can obviously attest that it can feel scary and traumatic. And I mean, Doretta doesn't have language barriers, doesn't have knowledge issues where she can understand some of the rules that she's broken. But can you imagine if you were a newcomer?
Yeah.
I mean, I also have a side story. So I got T-boned and had to take my car into a police station to file an accident report. And there was a man clearly new to the country who came in and seriously stressed and panicked because the CRA was calling saying he was getting deported. He was terrified.
Well, that's obviously a scam.
Yes, and it's obvious to the rest of us, but this was also a time I don't think we highlight scams as prevalently as we do today.
Hmm.
Because we know the CRA is not going to call you to threaten you. They don't have to. They will send you a letter. But I remember how awful I felt for this man because he will never have an experience like you did. This call was a scam, but ultimately it wrecked any perceptions he had of the CRA.
Yeah.
And yes, even I'm afraid of the CRA. Like, it's completely irrational. And I've worked with many folks who work there, but I think it's the institution rather than the people. But the point is, if you can't pay, contact them right away and make arrangements. It can be intimidating, but like Doretta said, once you contact them, the relief is real and it's generally not as bad as you think. Oh, and get your shit together before the call. Pull together your information, like social insurance number, tax info, and a budget and schedule of what you can afford to pay. They are reasonable, but they also want their money.
Yeah, and they'll get it too.
Yeah,
Now, there
one way or another.
exactly. Now, there are people you can hire to deal with CRA for you, and if you let the situation go on, you may well need that kind of professional support. But I would start by reaching out to them yourself first, like just being proactive, explaining your situation, offering a repayment plan. That really is the way to go. You will feel so much better after you do, promise. It's the anticipation that is so much worse than the reality of just dealing with it. Okay, I think that pretty much covers what to do if you owe. Now let's talk about refunds.
Now, this is the first year that I'm not getting one single tier. And I have to say, it feels kind of weird. And I told you, it inspired me to do a little spending. So
Yeah, which is pretty much the opposite of how it would affect most people. But what did you usually do with your refund?
I would say in the past few years, prepayment on my mortgage was the priority. Like I have shared, I have always been on a variable rate. So when interest rates shot up, it was very painful.
Yeah.
And when your interest rates were above 6%, my prepayment guaranteed a 6% return. What about you?
So I retired a couple of years ago, as you know, and once you retire, you pretty much have to pay. It's kind of how it works at this stage of your financial life.
If you're lucky, if you're one of those seniors who live on government benefits, which is around the poverty line, you don't have to pay taxes. See, this is why I went on a tiny spending spree.
Okay, that's true. But as a senior who has worked and saved for retirement, RSP withdrawals are real. I find it funny how so many retired people, and I hear it all the time, resent having to pay tax on the money they withdraw from their RSPs or their LIRA or whatever. They forget that they didn't have to pay taxes on the money when they put it in, which was generally the source of a tax refund.
I think that's because of this whole loss aversion thing. It's like getting $100 in a refund versus paying or losing $100 in a tax owing feels very different. But again, if you are paying taxes, you are doing all right. But what about during your employment years?
Well, that changed over time. There may have been a year or two when I first started working that it went to pay off credit card debt. And I seem to recall that one year I used it to pay off the balance of my student loan. But after that, the refunds generally went into RSPs or the kids' RESPs or got saved towards paying down the mortgage. And once we were lucky enough to be in a position to be mortgage free and maxed out on RSPs, it went to investments.
Yes. And that's why you pay taxes now. Well done. So, anyways, that was all very virtuous. You were never tempted to just blow it? Or some of it?
Me? Yeah, no. Blowing money just really is not part of my nature. It just doesn't burn a hole in my pocket. But there's another interesting thing because remember, I was self employed for a lot of years. And that is a really different situation. You don't get a paycheck, so nothing is withheld at source. You make quarterly installment payments that are based on your prior year's tax bill. So that means that you are very aware that you are sending money you earned to the government. If you had a good year, better than last, then generally you owe at the end of the year. But it's very different, I think,
Eh,
psychologically.
Interesting. Because you know where I'm going with this.
Hmm.
So many people blow their tax refunds because the money was deducted at source. They never saw it. And when it lands in their bank account, it feels like free money.
Yeah, I never thought of it like that, but you're right. When you're self employed, you're really aware of what you're paying in taxes. So when you get a refund, it does not feel like free money. It feels like getting your money back. At least it that's what it was like for me. And I would say that that really carried over when I got back into a full-time job with payroll deductions.
But let's talk about that tendency to treat tax refunds as free money because it's a real thing. There's a whole psychology around it. And when you think that the average tax refund is over $2,000, well, that's a lot of money.
Yeah. And it turns out that how we think about money really matters. Objectively, money is what economists call fungible. I love that word, fungible. It's a fancy way of saying that $1 is the same as any other dollar, they're fully interchangeable. But that's not how it actually works in our heads. Where the money comes from, the emotion that generates really matters. When it comes down to what we do with our money, we don't see dollars as fungible at all.
Ugh, those economists and their words. I don't know. I don't even know if I could spell that. But, anyways, I digress. Yeah, totally agree. Because our paychecks feel earned. And that means we tend to be more careful with that money. But bonuses, inheritances, lottery wins, tax refunds, those often feel like found money or extra money. And in our heads, that gives us permission to splurge. There was actually a study done in the US some years ago that found that most people actually prefer to overpay their taxes to generate a refund. It's kind of crazy. Um, because it was like a forced saving that then you had permission to spend.
Yeah, yeah. I remember my husband had a staff member who was always right on the top of their taxes, like to the minute, filed immediately, very keen for that refund. And my husband would offer to lower their payroll deduction every year, and they always refused because they really wanted to get that refund. It mattered more than the fact that they were actually overpaying during the year.
And I guess if it's that, enforced savings piece you're after, there are probably better ways to do it than letting the government use your money for free for a year. You can set up an automatic deductions into a savings or investment account. And also, forced savings means that you have to do something positive with that refund, aka not blowing it or spending it.
I don't know. Maybe that wouldn't be as fun. It wouldn't be like found money.
No, it would not be fun.
You'd know it was your own savings.
And to be fair, the cost of living is really catching up with people. This year's research is showing that most people do in fact have plans for their tax dollars this year, and it's a real change. A lot of people used to see tax refunds as fun money, but there's not a lot of room for that in today's budget. EQ Bank just released a survey a couple of weeks ago on how people were going to spend their tax refunds. 28% are paying down their debt. 22% are saying they need it to cover weekly expenses. 28% to contribute to RRSPs or TFSAs. And only 9% said that they would splurge.
Really responsible. But I have to say, that's not what I would have thought at all. And I don't think it's what it used to be like. I think it goes to show how long this affordability crisis has gone on. But the economy ebbs and flows. And now that we've all lived through high inflationary times, I don't know, maybe more in my time than in yours, but I think the way it generally works is that people tighten their belts for a bit, and then eventually they go back to their usual habits.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, so what the research is showing is how persistent the current inflationary cycle has been. It seems like once things ease, like post-COVID, something else would come up, like the housing thing. And now the war and that's doing to tax and energy prices, etc. It's like there's just one thing after another.
Yep.
But I can't help but wonder if people will end up with a fear complex about being super careful with their money, like many people who grew up in the Great Depression, or if the old habits will bounce back even with a vengeance, like the revenge spending we saw immediately post-COVID.
This is what I find interesting about economics. Saving and being fiscally conservative is an objectively smart move. It ensures you're prepared. So that can look like, you have an emergency fund for anything that can crop up, maybe $300 or $1,000 that you set aside. You have your lifeline savings of 3 to 6 months in case of job loss. You max out your registered savings vehicles as appropriate. You pay down debt if you have it. All great strategies to get your financial house in order. But what it doesn't do is stimulate the economy. If we don't spend, the economy continues to shrink. So consumer confidence is important, meaning that this research is great at the individual level, but perhaps not great in terms of economic recovery.
That is food for thought. And to put it in a historical context, after the Second World War, with all those returning soldiers, the context of being a good citizen actually changed completely, especially in North America. It was no longer about frugality and sacrifice. It was about being a good consumer to create jobs, and create jobs it did.
Mhm.
Okay.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I think it's time for our 3 key learnings for today.
Well, number one, file your taxes. Even if you owe and you can't pay, file them anyway. That way you avoid the filing penalty, which is big. If you can't pay, contact CRA and explain your situation. Prepare for the call by having your tax records, financial statements, and a budget in hand. We've put the contact numbers in the episode notes. There are also professionals out there who charge money to help you deal with the CRA, but try to talk to them yourself first. Try to rein in the fear and defensiveness and anger. CRA has real people whose job it is to help you work out a solution. Give them a chance.
Okay, number 2, remember that a tax refund is your own money. It is not a windfall. Don't blow it. Have a plan. If the refund is the result of a job loss or because you're entitled to benefits that are delivered through the tax system, those benefits will help you manage your living costs. If the refund is because you've overpaid, that means the government's been using your money for free. Think about adjusting your payroll deductions or your installment payments for next year. Yes, it generally is better to owe them than to get money back. Owing them may mean you've had a better than expected financial year and you've been using their money for free.
You're here. It is so important not to think of tax refunds as free money. Windfalls do weird things to our heads. We sometimes think of it as found money. It can even create guilt. Target debt first and then financial security basics. Your emergency fund, savings, investments. It's okay to spend a little bit on a treat, something that brings you joy. Life is, after all, about living, but don't let it be a decision that keeps you up at night. And finally, I will add this, although I didn't really mention it earlier. If tax season is stressful for you, maybe start earlier. Create a folder and keep track throughout the year so putting it together doesn't seem so overwhelming when the time comes. Then it becomes more of an administrative function rather than a full-blown personal investigation of numbers, documents, and receipts.
Hear, hear. And on that note, that's us for today. Do you owe this year, or will you be getting a refund? Either way, what's your plan? You can let us know by dropping us a line or 10 at notjustmoneypodcast@gmail.com.
Good talk. You've been listening to Not Just Money with Doretta and Lee. Click on the show's description for links to resources related to today's conversation. Our aim is to share sources that provide objective information that can help you make informed financial decisions. Please rate and review our show. If you'd like to get in touch with us, email us at notjustmoneypodcast@gmail.com. If you'd like to be featured on the show, you can send us your questions and comments by a written email, audio file, or video file. Please include your name and city. This show is produced and edited by Lee, with original music by Leo Zhang cello and artwork by John Tu. Now for some legalese. Please note that the views expressed by our hosts and guests are theirs alone and should not be viewed as financial advice. This podcast is intended to be entertainment and educational in nature. Please seek additional professional support or information before acting on any podcast information. As always, good talk.